So we see here, table one, we'll get started with the users table. I usually do that because all of my apps have users and we'll be able to connect them properly to Softr user settings later. But right now we will design the database table for our users. So I'll be starting here with the first column here. So each column is a field that will enable to categorize a part of the data of this table. So as we see here, we have a select kind of field, so you can easily select, for example, a status for a project. But this is not our case. I'll be just removing these two columns, these two fields, and have actually my primary column, so the first column being the email, because here I recommend this primary column, this primary field, to always be as unique as possible. For example, a first name would not be a great choice because you might have two people called Jane, and whenever you want to filter on that or to search for Jane, then we'll see multiple results that will not help you to know who is whom. So email is a great unique identifier for companies. Using a website is quite good. In some cases, you can also use a company name because it's also quite unique. For example, in your vendor ecosystem, there is a high chance that not two vendors, not two companies have the same name, but always think about having something as unique as possible. And that's where we'll be able to just add some data here, for example. And that's how we would have a first user with that email. I'll be adding another field that is a short text for, let's say, the full name. Perfect. And as we said here, we will have two user roles, and we will actually fit all our users within the same table. But the way to know if you are either an admin or a vendor, so working for one of these companies that you're working with, we'll actually be using here a select field that we call a role that will determine your role for later within the application. So I'm gonna name that one admin and here vendor. And that way, if I decide that Jeanne Dupont is an admin, later when we'll configure our users, we'll be able to create a user group and say, okay, you are an admin, like a user group is admin for everyone who has admin here as a role, and that's it. That way you don't have to create multiple tables, for example, here, one here for admin users and one for vendor users, because you definitely want to keep all your users in the same table. So now before creating any more field, and we'll have some other fields for user, I'll simply be creating all the tables that we need. So vendors, we had as well invoices, we had tasks, and I think documents. And I'm creating all the tables already because we'll need these tables to create what we call a related record. So that's a way to say a user here is, for example, related to a vendor. So if we already just add some names, so let's say we have a first vendor, we'll be able here, if I type related record, this is a type of field, and I'll call that works at assay. I can decide that this field is related to the table vendors, and we don't allow to link to multiple vendors because they always work for only one. And that way I can simply say, okay, this user, so that would be more for the case of a vendor because admins will not be assigned to any vendor in that way. But when I open this tab now, I see that I automatically have this mirrored field that is being created. And that way we really have this connection that exists. And I can, for example, right click here to add lookup fields, and I can be pulling data from that other table automatically so that, for example, we could have here first full names of the team. And if I link someone else, for example, Niels as a vendor as well for that same company, we'll have here automatically a list of all the first names because we are pulling automatically all the users that we have connected. So I'll remove this for now, but this is one of the most important principles in relational databases like Softr databases. Using related fields is the way to make your data structure as robust and scalable as possible. And it is way better, way more organized and structured than Excel because, for example, here in this column, it is only one of the different, so here, one of the two values, and you cannot end up with a date, for example, somehow for another record. Okay, so now looking back at my plan, I had already planned all the different fields for my tables, and I will be implementing that right now. So it's a good opportunity to go through the different field types. So for example, phone number, we have a native field for phone number, and yeah, which will automatically enable here for any country. But for example, in form later in your app, you can also make sure it validates that it's really the phone number format. We have the same for URLs, like there are multiple different native fields that will really make it easy for you to make this database scalable. So another one we'll add is the avatar, and for that we'll need a file. And basically, as we import a picture, we will be able to map that field to the avatar field of Softr so that they will see in their interface their little avatar icon, but we'll also be able to display it. Maybe if we have a list of all the users of a specific vendor, we'll be able to display that nicely. So I'm going to add all the remaining fields now. So I'm adding here a status for users, because in the app, the vendors will be able to invite their team members and will let an admin approve that so that we're maximizing the security of the app. So if you are in a pending state, your account is not active yet, and it will have to be approved by an admin. And from there, when this user will try to log in, they will be able to log in and give their email and maybe receive a one-time use code to access their account for the first time. Everything is now in one place. I'm going to the user's setting now because Softr provides out of the box a user system. And what is very powerful is that we are able here to sync it to a data source, and I will actually be mapping that to the users table that we had created. And to finalize this mapping, I have to say that the email field for users is actually the field that I called in my database email. And for the name, we also had a full name, and we also got an avatar field that we can map. We could be mapping other fields, for example, the created time for each users that we could be doing later. But right now, I will stick to that. But there is also something that is specific to our app right now. We said that for users, we have a status active or pending because users on the vendor side will be able to invite their colleagues, but we want these invites to be approved by admins. So using this structure, we will be able to say, okay, if a user has pending for this value, we will actually not create a proper app user for that person right now until it is set to be active. And to do that, we will here decide to only sync the records for which the rule status includes any of active. And that way, until they are validated, approved by the admins, they will not have a proper account. And then we'll also be able to create a workflow that whenever someone is approved, we will actually send them an email to invite them to log in for the first time. And because they haven't set any password yet, it will actually be sending them a one-time password that they can use to connect, and then they can set up their own password. So now we see that all our users have been pulled. I'll just remove the test user. And it is now properly connected to our database, which means that whenever we'll add a new record that has active as a status, it will be created as a user in here. And for this user system, we have specific settings that enable some granularity. For example, we are here enabling the login because it's an app that will have some hidden and private pages only for logged in users to access. But then we can also set the specific authentication method, for example, here. For the email, we will also allow to log in via a one-time code that will be sent via email because some of our users will not have had the opportunity to set up their own password. You could also be enabling Google Sign-in to make it even easier to access the app. And right now we are actually disabling signups because it's not a public app that people could join just by seeing the sign up page and creating their account. We are actually keeping the full control over who gets an account, also with this admin validation system. And in there, we will keep these settings. It will simply ask for security reasons everyone to re-log in after 90 days of being logged in for the first time. And I'll go in here into user groups because we'll have to set up these two user groups, so admins and vendors, because based on that, later when configuring the app, we'll be able to say, okay, this page, for example, is only accessible for admins, or this button to delete a record is only possible for vendors, for example, if they want to delete their own documents. So I'll be adding a group called admins, and this group will be condition based because we've already planned this field in our database role in here that decides if they are an admin or a vendor. So it makes it very easy to create the conditions for these groups. And another one will be vendors, again, with the condition that they are a vendor in our database. From there, we have these two simple user groups. Some apps require more because you need different levels of granularity. For example, you could have a vendor admin and also vendor collaborator. That's for you to decide how granular do you want to go. And I would recommend to plan this before building the app so you can really decide who, like what user groups can have access to what features or only view certain records. Now there is another feature that's provided out of the box by Softr, which is super convenient, called data restriction. This is a security setting that will be used app-wide to decide who can see or edit or create or delete what. And we can also make that work with our user groups. So I'll be selecting our data source vendor portal and then a specific table. For example, the table tasks. And I will say, all right, if you are in the user group vendors, you can only view the tasks for which the vendor, so the company the task is assigned to, is actually, as a logged in user, the company you are assigned to, which means that you will only see the tasks of your company as a vendor, which is a way to prevent anyone from seeing data they shouldn't be seeing, but it will also make the app building experience easier because we'll not have to create for each block all sorts of filters to only make sure we are displaying the right tasks, because this will be provided out of the box by this data restriction feature. So I'll be adding that for the different objects of our app that really need such security layers. And by the way, I could also set that, for example, these users cannot create such records or edit such records. In our case, making sure they cannot even view these records will already be a good security to make sure that they don't even interact with them, so cannot create or edit or delete any of the records that they shouldn't be accessing. All right, I think in our case, these are the four things we want to limit. We are only limiting vendors as a user group because the admin will have visibility and access to all the records of all the different vendors because they are dealing with all these vendors as admin of the company that established this vendor portal.